Scott Mast joins me this week to discuss growing hops. This is BeerSmith Podcast number 308. This is BeerSmith Podcast number 308, and it's early August 2024. Scott Mast joins me to discuss growing hops at home. Thank you to this week's sponsors, Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine. They've recently launched an all-new experience called Craft Spirits and Distilling. If you make or love spirits, check out spiritsanddistilling.com for recipes, how-to videos, their Spirits and Distilling podcast, and much more. Again, that new site is spiritsanddistilling.com. And also BeerSmith Web, the online version of BeerSmith brewing software. BeerSmith for the Web lets you design great beer recipes from any browser, including your tablet or phone. Edit recipes on the go with access to the same full suite of recipe building tools as our desktop version. Try BeerSmith Web today by creating a free account at beersmithrecipes.com. And finally, a reminder to click on that like and subscribe button on YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, or whatever platform you're on. Clicking those buttons is a great way to support the show. And now let's jump into this week's episode. Today on the show, I welcome Scott Mast. Scott is a Michigan-based hops farmer with 8 years in the business. He's also the owner of Hang 'em High Hops, the largest producer of Michigan proprietary hops designed by Great Lakes Hops. Scott, how are you doing, man?
I am doing wonderful. How are you, Brad?
I'm good. Things are nice here in Virginia. We're getting a little bit of rain today, but how are things up in Michigan?
Michigan has been a warm, long summer already. So we started out with warm temps all the way in May. And we have rain every 3 to 5 days. So if you can't grow this year, you shouldn't be growing.
So is that good for the hops or bad for the hops? I guess good, probably, right?
It's wonderful. It's wonderful. Consistent temperatures, warm temperatures, and lots of rain is helpful for us. It just makes everything else cheaper. And we don't have to water as much throughout the year. So it just makes the stress levels for the plants pretty minimal.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, it's actually been almost 2 years since I last had you on the show. I understand you've been growing pretty fast up there.
We have, actually. We brought on 5 new distributors that were selling 120 different varieties of hops. We're selling malts, grains, adjuncts, fruit purees. We've even dabbled in cans, labeling, everything under the sun. So our little hop yard has expanded to the point where now we're carrying around 750 SKUs when we used to carry around 40 SKUs in our inventory.
Are you selling all those through Hang 'em High Hops, or?
We are. We're selling everything through Hang 'em High Hops. We're covering all 50 states, and then we're selling through 7 countries. So we have hops as far as Mexico and Canada, but we're over in England. We've shipped hops over to Australia, Italy, France, kind of touching base everywhere and anywhere we can interact. We've been having a lot of fun doing that, and allowing us to gain more products has put us on the map a little bit larger to interact with some larger breweries because we're carrying more product line. And it just helps with sales. It evens out the balance of the sales. And the nice thing about it is all the distributors that we work with, you can buy it from the distributor direct, or you can buy it from us for the same price. So we get a percentage of the sale, whether it's 10 or 15 or 20%, whatever they allow us through the distribution chain. So we can sell grain the same price you're going to buy grain from somebody else. It's just buying through us, a one-stop shop.
Oh, that's great. And so you're doing that in addition. Obviously, you're still growing hops, right? How big is your hop growing operation at the moment?
So currently we're 28 acres, but we only grow proprietary hops. So we grow Michigan proprietaries, and then we have 4 other hop farms in Michigan that grow more common varieties along with some Michigan proprietaries. And then we have hop yards down in Indiana, Ohio, California, and some in the Washington, Oregon area that we're also purchasing and reselling and buying hops from on a weekly basis.
Wow. So you're partnering up obviously with a lot of other hop growers, not only regionally, but around the country now.
Correct. Yeah, we had to kind of sell a common 4 items just doesn't work. So our brewers wanted more. They wanted to interact with us. And what we've done is we've actually probably lost a little bit of our overall customer base, but grown our existing customer base larger. So the person that would buy from us every 3 months or every quarter, um, or monthly if they're a smaller brewer because they don't have the space, started buying 10, 15, 20 SKUs, and we started carrying grain. All of a sudden, they're getting semi-truckloads to their place every 6 weeks rather than me shipping a 44-pound box of hops or 11-pound bag of hops. Now we're shipping, 440 to 1,300 pounds. And that's really improved our interaction with the brewers because their products are consistent and they only got to call one person. So they've been loving it.
And are you primarily distributing to commercial brewers, I assume craft breweries, or are you also still working with home brewers?
So we work with both. Now, home brewing has gotten lesser over the years. We still supply to several different homebrew stores in Ohio, Chicago, 3 here in Michigan, a couple out west, California, one down in Texas. We have a couple different larger online people that will carry some of our product lines that your customer base would know. There's kind of like the big 3 that you're going to buy homebrew supplies from.
Yeah.
And then those are getting bought out a little bit. So we've had a couple of them not go under, but get bought out by the larger groups. And then on the brewing side, we cover everybody. So we have the small brewer, probably makes up about 50 to 60%. So we're talking 5 barrel or less. It's probably 60% of our business. And then the middle section there is probably that 5 to 10 barrel group. And then we have our 5%, which is the 50 to 100 barrel systems that only purchase maybe that once every 3 months or once every 6 months, but their orders are always large. We got a couple large breweries that do quarterly beers with us that are, between 600 and 1,000 pounds of hops at a time.
Wow. Yeah, that's a lot of hops.
And that's a big deal for us. So that's kind of our breakup of what we do. Homebrewers still contact us weekly. They still buy online weekly. But I would say it's still less than 5 to 10% of our overall business. I'd say less than 5% of our overall business is home brewers direct.
Yeah, and you're still on Hang 'em High Hops, right? What's the website again?
It's hang'emhighhops.com. And yes, we're still on the website there. And we're actually producing a brand new website right now. It took us 6 months to get this all done, which will carry all 750 SKUs. So at that point, if you're a home brewer and you want to buy commercial grade malt or grains or sugars or anything, we're going to sell direct to you at commercial pricing, which is unheard of and rare because we're not out there trying to make the extra dollar per. We're trying to get you done and on the way into brewing something new. So we have a lot of home brewers now buying grain from us, but it's people in our group in Michigan, and soon this will be United States wide.
That's awesome. Good for you.
Yeah.
Today we wanted to get into some of the details of growing hops and perhaps discuss how people might do it at home. Scott, can you explain what a hop plant actually is and why growing hops is a lot different than, putting corn seed in the ground or something like that?
So hop plants are perennial, and perennial plants, they're going to come up every single year. And we see that a commercial grade hop plant, we hope lasts around 20 to 25 years. We see a decrease in growth, and we have to change out that plant. But we have hop plants wildly grown around Michigan and around several other states that have been growing for hundreds of years, and they continue to grow and process. So when we look at the weird growth of a hop plant, there is some things that we kind of have similarities with existing crops, and then we have things that are completely different. So a hop plant is a native plant to the United States, but it is a very, what do you want to say? It devours everything in its path. It eats twice as much. It covers, it chokes out greenery. It chokes out trees. So it's kind of like this vicious little plant that we try to control. The other thing about hop plants is they really like to winter. The other plant that's similar to a hop plant, like a tulip, that likes to go down for the winter and be frozen for 6, 8, 12 weeks. And what it's doing at that point is it's taking its food stores and turning them into glucose, which allows them not to freeze and crack. And then what happens there is it uses that energy to sprout up in the following spring. So when you look at a hop plant, it needs to get cold storage. And that's where we run into some issues the last 4 or 5 years where we've had warmer than normal winters. And some of our varieties will act differently in the spring due to not having that time in the ground with temperatures below 30 degrees.
Hmm.
And I have another point here on that one. I wrote some notes down so we could
It's
give
all
some of
good.
that. So when we get into the plants or the hop plant side of things, if there's other farmers out there, people that have done other things, the hop plant nutrients and ground wise is very similar to like a asparagus plant. And then the care for a hop plant is very similar to a fruit tree like apples or oranges or peaches. So if you've ever grown a peach or an apple in the yard, or if you've ever grown asparagus in the yard, that's the two closest things that hop plants are to. And that's about it.
Hmm. What's sort of the ideal environment for them? You mentioned winters are good for them, I guess.
So the ideal environment, and really, everyone says the 45th parallel. So the 45th parallel, if you look at that around the United States, that's where you're going to see Washington, Michigan, Germany, all those kind of hit on that same line. Now you can be plus or minus either direction. And we have a lot of people that grow south of us 2, 3, 4 hours, and they all make it work. It's when you get into that point where you have no winter whatsoever. So the people in Ohio that we work with, they started harvesting 3 weeks ago
Mm-hmm.
or 2 weeks ago. And we start harvesting at the end of August, and we'll harvest all the way up to October. So the farther north we get, the plants act differently, kind of on where they locate on the parallel.
So is it dry or wet environment better for them?
So the soil really has a lot to do with it. So when we're picking out soils, when we did this last group or this last location, we looked for a glacier deposit of sand, gravel, and black dirt. Um, Most people in our business that are looking for it look for very drainable soil. So hop plants they love getting water. They just don't like to stay wet. So we will pump water to these things at 200, 150 to 200 gallons a minute, depending on the zone, for 16 hours a day. And it cycles half hour on, half hour off, or half hour on, 1 hour off, half hour on, 1 hour off. And what this allows it to do is it continuously gets water. We try to do at least a gallon to 2 gallons, depending on what cycle it's in, per plant.
Wow.
Yeah, if you're in clay, that is a completely different process. Most people who's in the commercial side won't grow in a clay scenario because they get a lot of root rot and a lot of disease that happens in the root systems if they don't get good drainage. So kind of what we say here in Michigan is um, as long as you're able to get the water to them and they go to bed dry at night, you're pretty well safe. Um, yeah, that's
That's
kind of what we
amazing.
look
Yeah,
at.
I had no idea so much water was needed. Anyway, so hop rhizomes are cut from a live plant, and then they sell them commercially. However, there are some proprietary ones available, obviously, to the public. What's the difference between the proprietary and publicly available ones? And where can you purchase rhizomes, for example?
So rhizomes, they call them rhizomes. It's a root system that's coming off the crown of the hop that gets trimmed either in the fall or the spring, depending on how your process works. And it'll just have a long piece of root coming off the side of this crown. Um, and that root can be planted anywhere. So these plants are so oddly, what do you want to say? They grow out of anything. So when we chop these things up through our machinery, we'll dump a pile somewhere and it'll start another hop plant. They love to reproduce. So the three different ways they do it is they can do a rhizome, or they can do a trimming or a clipping, similar to a clipping on a tree or a flower. You can clip it, stick it in soil, stick it in water, and have it regrow. And then they can do Petri growth. So the proprietary world of growing something out of nothing, which is what we have here, started out in the Petri level of growing a plant out of a mother and a father and interacting with it and growing it out of nothing. That's way above my pay grade. I do not understand completely how they process all that information, but it's really neat to watch and see. So on our end of it, on the proprietary side, we bought all proprietary plants, which are trimmings off from parent plants. So the parent plants are grown from a clean stock of Petri dish plants made from their own design, scientifically designed plants. and then they grew the parent plants, and they take clippings and trimmings off the parent plants to produce the hops that we grow in our yard. For the rhizomes, you can purchase those mostly from out west, the larger yards. If you're here in Michigan, you can probably call up your local hop yard. There's 10 of us around here yet, and say, hey, I want to come grab some rhizomes, and they just come and grab them. I mean, they're laying, thousands of them in a field are laying everywhere.
So is that how the plant reproduces? From what I understand, all the plants are female, right?
Correct. Yeah. So we do not like male plants in our field. The ones that we get produced are genetically set up for female only. The funny thing about the plants is if you stress them out to a limit, which several different plant varieties do this, if you can stress it out to a max limit of water, food, or whatnot, like if you have a piece of irrigation that's not working, some varieties will actually turn and they'll become male and female at the same time, with fear of they're not going to be able to continue to live. So we see that some places on bad years, where last year we only had an inch of rain in 112 days.
Wow.
And the irrigation wasn't giving them enough to where we'll have a plant grow some male seeds. It's very rare, but it does happen. It seems like it happens consistently around the United States and Germany at the same time with the same varieties, which we always thought was crazy. But yeah, that's the reason we plant females only. Females create the cones without any byproduct or male seeds, and male seeds are hard to clean and get out of, and they're a different flavoring, bitter. So when we get those male seeds in our process, we have to cut them out and burn them out.
Now, related to that, do you have a problem with contamination from wild hops? Because I know they're native to the area, right?
They are. We have heard that in the past, where a male plant from a mile away, did something to your plants in there. We have not seen it on our end. We're only about 10 miles from Lake Michigan. I don't think there's any hop plants from here to there, unless, we have a large Polish and German community here that brought hop plants over. I'm sure there's some growing somewhere, but nothing has had an issue. But I have heard of it from other hop yards that, yes, we had this plant here and it caused a problem, but I've not seen anything. I can't confirm that. It's just it's an interesting thought process.
Well, are any of the proprietary hop rhizomes, are they available to home brewers at all, or are they not available because of licensing?
So the licensing requirements for us to grow these proprietaries is a minimum of 1 acre. I know they've loosened their belt a little bit, as the home brewers are not going to be out there selling plants and selling everything else. So the only real way you can tell and interact is call Great Lakes Hops and see what their interaction would be. They do sell all their other varieties, the commercial and non-commercial varieties they sell, and they have a bunch of specialty plants there that are specifically just for homebrew groups. And so, I'll put my little spurt in there that Great Lakes Hops, those guys will sell you 1 plant, they'll sell you 10 plants. My only recommendation on the rhizome or planting for the home brewers is just find something that works good with your soil, and ask them which one is the most disease-free. So I have hop plants at my house that have been growing for a decade, and I don't do anything to them. I don't feed them. I don't water them. I don't put fertilizer down. It's heavier soil there, but they grow to be gigantic every single year, and they're beautiful, but they're cascade, and they're very simple and easy to use and easy to interact with, very disease-free, and not all plants are like that, especially hop plants.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the reasons some are obviously more popular than others. They're just easier to grow, right?
Correct. And the hard ones to grow that people love, which we have one, Hydra, which is our number 1 selling hop. I shouldn't say that. Bergamont's our number 1 selling hop. Hydra's our most sought after.
Mm-hmm.
But that thing is a giant pain to grow. Everything loves it. Disease loves it. Bugs love it. It doesn't like to have too much water. It likes specific fertilizer, different than our other 3 varieties. It's just a real interesting interaction with that hop. And once we figured it out, it grows beautifully. So anybody that's growing that in the future usually contacts us for a laundry list of the do's and don'ts. But yeah, every hop plant is different. And that's very specific to the region you're in also.
Well, one of the interesting things is hops, much like grapes, take on the terroir or the character of the local soil. Has growing hops again in the Midwest produced some unique character for the hops that you've grown?
So yes, we do have some uniqueness to our hops. We have one very large success that Michigan is known for, and each place you grow, and it doesn't matter if it's just different state, but it can be 2 hours down the road, different water intake, different. They all have a different variance. But our greatest change that we have is we call it a Michigan Chinook. And Michigan Chinook is one of the largest sought after hops. That's a common variety that's been grown for years and years and years. We sell out of a yard of Michigan Chinook, and we sell to Washington that has brand new fresh Chinook sitting right next door to their brewery, and they'll buy Michigan Chinook due to the differences in the flavoring. They love it that much. So that's one of the hops that we've had a lot of success with here in Michigan because it's very unique to us. We thought that maybe it was just a planting, that one took on different characteristics due to its mother plant, but we have it growing now in I think 5 or 6 different locations, and all of them carry the same. So it's just a Michigan variety that's different than the ones you get out west.
Now, getting to the actual planting of hops, obviously you plant the rhizome in the ground, and then once you plant it, it grows upwards on a trellis every year. What does a commercial trellis actually look like? I've seen people use all kinds of things for trellises.
And they have anything to get it to grow up in the air. So if you're a home brewer and you want to do it outside, go right off the top of your house down to the ground. On the commercial level, you're going to see there's only 3 designs out there, truthfully. We're going to be running all telephone poles, 22 to 25-foot telephone poles. Usually it's a weaker pole in the inside with a red or a white pine, and then a yellow pine to the outside for the 25-footers. And they're put in on an angle to help the gravity hold the weight. So to kind of put it in perspective, our yard at 28 acres can carry 1,600,000 pounds of weight during full production.
Wow.
So every plant weighs 40 pounds. Some are a little bit less, some are a little bit more, but let's say roughly 30 to 50 pounds each plant. And we got 40-some thousand plants out there. And you go through that process and you watch these things wave in the air. Well, that angle that we put on that field on the outside just allows that thing to kind of give it a little bit of gravity and hold that thing in place. So the biggest thing that we do at our hop yard for commercially is we allow this thing to float. So nothing's fixed, tightened, or hit in place. This thing can blow from side to side. It can move. And sometimes during bad 60-mile-an-hour storms, we'll have a telephone pole bend all the way over like a question mark, but it doesn't break anything, and we have to prop it back into place or put a new one in. Yeah, it's crazy.
That is crazy.
It is.
I'm imagining. So you got these telephone lines out there, and then hanging off it. What have you got? Like a web of wire, or how does that work?
It is. So we have main lines and guy lines. So the main lines, we currently run a 1x7 line for our mains, and then a 1x7 line, which is all aircraft cable, they call it. But some people put in a 1x7, and then on the cross side of it, they'll use a barbed wire. And that has to do with their process of removing the hops, that every time you hit a barbed wire, it will stick right there, and then it will break the line, because the lines that we use for the hops to grow up are 100 or 110 or 120 pound line. So if you can put more than 120 pounds on that line, it will break. So some of the picking equipment that they use puts a piece of barbed wire up there so it has a place to stop to pull that hop down. We do a different system for us, so we run all 1x7. The original yards that came to Michigan, which I think are more German design, was all single wire lines, which have to be replaced every 3 to 5 years due to stretching and everything else. And that was the worst. So our yards have been up for a decade now, and we've never had to change out a wire unless something got damaged. So 1x7 is about your main go-to. We've tried several different others that all stretch, and that's the biggest thing, is you want things not to stretch.
Do you periodically train or trim the vines to get them to grow up the trellis?
Let me see here. What did I have down for that? So training and trimming. So we'll trim these plants down and cut the crown and cut the sides off this hill, and we chop this thing down so it's just the crown sitting in the dirt.
Mm-hmm. You do that every year, right?
We do it every year. Yep. we actually do ours in the fall, and then we cover it. Some people do it in the spring, but we do it in the fall here just because we have a little bit longer fall, and we sometimes our spring is we go from winter to training in less than 2 weeks, so we just don't have as much time in the spring as we do in the fall. Um, and then for the training, so these hop plants, so you imagine like a vine anywhere. These plants grow clockwise up. So in our yard, we have about 85% of our yard, maybe 90% of our yard is a self-training yard. And this was a happy accident that happened about 5 years ago, where we had a mistake. We process our own hop twine, and typically we would run our hop twine down. It would stab into the ground with a clip. Well, through the process, we had raised our irrigation. We were going to try to run it closer to the irrigation so we had more room for our tractor to go through. And we had a miscut of lines to where they were too short. So we just threw them in there. They didn't go into the ground. They just dangled up in the air. And the happy accident was, as we came back after 3 days, and that whole section that had the shorter twine was trained. So what we figured out throughout the years and kind of videoing and having a better idea is when you have a fixed line, that plant can't locate it because this plant moves around all the time. It grows anywhere from 3 to 9 inches a day. And so when this thing's curving around with the sun, trying to find a place to climb, our hop twine was fixed in one location. When we allowed the hop twine to move and float in the air, they can find each other. And it was just a weird deal. We used to have like 6, 7 people out here for weeks at a time training. And now we have 2 to 3 people, maybe a day and a half to finish the yard.
Wow.
So it was a huge change. It was a happy accident. We've had other farms do the same thing. They see the same results. And so we spend more time going through and making sure that we only have 1 to 3 binds per string, because if they're self-training and they're doing it correctly, they can train as many as 10 binds per string, which is not appropriate. So we go through and we train or not train. We pull the tip off the end of the hop twine or the hop plant, and then it will stop growing. So yeah, that was our happy little accident. So we do train, but we train very little, and we allow the plant to do its thing. And
so you're just letting it the string dangle or whatever, right?
We are. We actually have a video online that shows the process. If you look up Hang 'em High Hops on YouTube,
that's pretty cool.
And we have people over. We've had people in Minnesota. We've had people in 2 people in Michigan, and then 1 out in the East Coast that all attempted the same thing, and they all received the same deal. And a big thank you, because they were sick of walking around and training is one of the worst things, and then stabbing those lines into the ground is a horrible process of just time. So anyway, it was a big cost savings, and it was a nice way to get your spring done. And the fun thing about it is you can do it on Friday, and then you get there on Monday. We'll have acres of plants train themselves in 3 days.
Wow. That's pretty cool.
Well, they're just doing what they're trained to do, you know?
Yeah, they're just trying to find a way to grow. I assume you're using some kind of fertilizer and insecticide to prevent pests. Sounds like that varies also by whatever variety you're talking about too, right?
It does a little bit. So we do a large amount of leaf testing and foliar testing here. So we test every 2 weeks in the spring and midsummer, and then we hit about the 3rd week or 2nd week of July, and we will test every week until harvest. We used to do it only 2 weeks. When we first started, we did it once a month. And so we only give these plants what they need. We give them 2 doses of dry fertilizer, and then we feed them every 5 days. So they'll get, for our plants, because we're low on calcium in this area, we feed them liquid calcium, which is a travel path for the plant to take nutrients from the ground all the way up to the top. And the plant's 18 foot tall, so that takes a lot. And calcium allows a pathway to allow that to happen. And then right now they're eating boron, iron, and magnesium, I'm sorry. That's what they're eating right now while they're creating the cones. Before that, they'll be eating nitrogen and some of the micronutrients, so we supply those to them. And it's all different times of the year. We have it all specced out now, of what they get and how they get it. If we have a problem area in the field, we get 6 tests, different locations, actually different soil types in the field. We get those 6 tests every week, and then we'll spray or spot spray the plant if it's missing something in that specific area. and that'll go right in with the chemical treatments. So the chemical treatments is just like apples. So apples get a lot of bugs and a lot of mildew and a lot of problems when you create an apple. And those apples that you have in the store, you cannot imagine how much spraying it takes to make a beautiful, perfect apple. For all you organic people out there, you should be eating apples with holes in them and bugs, because that is the healthiest apple you can eat. For us, we have to spray every 5 to 7 days. We're in Michigan here. We have cold nights and hot days, which causes humidity variances in the morning. We get a lot of mildew from plants staying wet in the morning. And so we spray for mildew, like I said, every 5 to 7 days. Sometimes we have to do it every 3 days if we have constant rainstorms.
Wow.
But that's our most consistent process. We feed every 5 days and we spray every 5 to 7 days. And it's a blast sprayer that will blast through the entire plant, cover every leaf. Bugs are not as serious of an issue, but they still get sprayed probably once a month for bugs. And we do a lot of testing with bugs, to where we'll pull a leaf off and we'll take a magnifying glass and we'll count the good bugs versus the bad bugs. Some people will go out and spray for all bugs, which is completely, we did it when we first started. It's the worst thing you can do. You have to spot spray specifically for bugs or mites, because you're killing good mites with the bad mites, or ladybugs or whatnot, or spiders. You don't want to kill all those. You want them to continue to eat the mites on the plants. What we like to say here at Hang 'em High Hops is we've had every disease and every issue with every animal and insect that we can possibly have. We just know how to work with them or maintain them now. It's not that we don't get them. We get everything. We just know how to maintain it comfortably without overreacting.
Now, I absolutely can't do all that at home, right? I don't have quite the facilities you do, but if somebody's at home, could I use regular fertilizer on it? Could I use regular plant spray on it, for example?
Absolutely. So Sevens is what I've used on my plants at home. That works wonderful. If you're having a bad, Japanese beetle is the worst that I get at my house with the plants. For fertilizer, if you're planting in the ground, and I don't want to speak out of my question here, I think you have one farther down, but
that's okay.
The simplest things for a home brewer or a person who just wants to grow a hop at home is to drill a big hole. If you're in clay or dirt or whatnot, just drill a big hole with a post hole digger or whatnot. I tell them 12 to 18 inches, 2 to 3 foot down, and fill it full of Miracle-Gro. Put some sand in the bottom, go get potting soil. The cheapest dirt you can get, just get something with nutrients in it, and throw a couple hop plants in the middle of it. That thing will grow for 10 years. If you get excited at the beginning of the year, throw a ring. I always tell them a cup full of fertilizer, 12-12 or triple 19, and throw that around it. That plant will grow forever. And if you pick a variety like Cascade is the simplest variety to grow. You'll have a plant I think I have one at home right now it grows down a 48 inch tall or 4 foot tall fence. And I think it's 20 foot each direction from where it's growing. And it covers the entire fence. And It's big and it's huge and it's beautiful. And I don't do anything. I'll throw fertilizer at it if I think of it. But otherwise it just goes. So the commercial side is tougher than the home side because you have so much quantity that anything that happens will spread like wildfire. So if we get a little mildew, we've watched an acre of plants go in less than 7 days. If you get mildew in it, the wind will blow and it will spread. You can watch it spread through the whole field.
Wow.
And that end on the home side, you just got that one plant. If it gets a little disease, you spray it, and then it sits there and it's not catching anything else.
Right. How long after you plant does it take a vine to begin actually producing commercial quality hops?
So the norm is 3 to 5 years. That's what the brewers want to see. We have some varieties, and throughout all the varieties that we grow or the people that we work with, we have some varieties that can produce commercial or mature grade oils, alpha betas, the first year. And we have some that take 2 to 3 years to reach that oil level. So the maturity of the hop is what we do when we test the hop for the essential oils and the alpha betas. The maturity level of the plant, that can happen quickly. We do not harvest any first year plants anymore. We used to years ago. It actually costs more than it's worth. So we don't actually get to look at the oils full fledged until the second year. And then what we do during harvest is we balance out to see, how much quantity of a second year plant are we going to have. So if I have a commercial grade 10-acre lot and I'm going to produce 15,000 pounds of hops, and I have a 2-acre section or an acre that's just a 2-year-old plant, and let's say I'll only have 1,000 pounds of that one. So I'm mixing 1,000 pounds with 15,000 pounds. At that point, the blend works pretty good as long as the alpha, betas, and oils are less than 1% different. But some of our plants, they spike up right away. And so we can put them in with the natural blend. But it all has to do at the end. So what ends up happening is if we have an immature plant, we'll still harvest it. We'll keep it in its own separate bales and we'll create a different lot. Because hops at the end of the day are just a food additive for flavor. So some people might look at that hop and say, that one's not mature enough to what I'm used to. So if we have a bergamot plant and they've been, bergamot's now 9 years old, they're like, bergamot, it always tastes like this, but this is supposed to be bergamot, but it doesn't taste the same. It doesn't mean it's going to make a bad beer. It's just if you're a consistency brewer, you want your bergamot beer to taste like that every single time you brew.
Sure.
And so we just offer a different lot. So for a lot of different brewers, we'll say, hey, we got this other lot. It's a little bit cheaper. It's a more immature plant. Do you want to try it out? And some people say, well, now I want that. And we can't give them that again because when it matures, then it becomes its own, consistency with the rest of the plants. So that's something that we monitor.
I'm sorry. I meant for a home brewer, though, you could probably, 2 years, second year maybe harvest?
Oh, no. If you're a home brewer, you can harvest first year.
Okay.
Yeah, we've harvested first year plants. It's still going to have the oils. It's going to have everything in there. It might not be as potent, but just add a little more. No problems at all. The only reason we say commercial grade 3 to 5 years is so that it's always consistent. So the biggest thing we don't want to do is provide a plant that's, 3% less alpha beta on the second year, then all of a sudden the third and the fourth year it jumps up to 5% higher than what it was. We don't want a whole bunch of commercial breweries making a recipe off from something that's not consistent. And that's the only reason. If you're a home brewer, throw it in there. Have some fun.
What type of machine do you use to actually harvest the hops?
So the most common equipment out there is a German-made Wolf harvester, which at the end of the day is it's like a corn combine with no wheels. So it works off gravity and allows the cones to roll. So we're picking all these things with large fingers, and then the cone rolls down belts that are inclined. It runs through air belts, which suck out the leaves and the material, and then it keeps on doing that. So it's a very consistent process. There's only one design, but it does it 3 to 4 different ways in the same machine. So we run our machine at 330 binds an hour, and we process about an acre of hops every 7.5 hours. There's much larger machines. We have another distributor of ours that does an acre an hour.
Wow.
With 2 gigantic machines and people running all over the place. We're not big enough for that, so we have this mid-level machine, and it was built in the 80s, and the German design on this thing is amazing. And my background is engineering, and these guys are phenomenal. They create a beautiful piece of equipment. We've had all the other machines here that were built in the States. So we had a 5P harvester, which is a 5-acre or less harvester. I've used some of the other ones, and these are makeshift machines where people designed, I shouldn't say makeshift, they were beautifully designed machines for the smaller grower when hops took off here in 2008, 9, and 10.
Mm-hmm.
And they do work. We look at the clean material after the fact. So our Wolf machine, all set up to run, might have 1 to 2% of leaf and byproduct matter that makes it through. A Wolf harvester might be as high as 10 to 15%. So you got to have somebody there picking out leaves or picking out byproduct to get your stuff clean. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of the machines that are out there. But Wolf is the number one. And then I would say the 5P for the small growers, the number 2. I see those all over the place yet. We owned one for 5 years.
Now, obviously, at home, I'd probably harvest just by hand. But what's the time? How do you pick the best time to harvest? Is there a way I could, look at a cone and decide that it's time to harvest my homegrown hops?
Okay, so there's a couple different ways, and I'll keep the scientific ways out of it. So if you go out there to the yard and you pinch on this cone, and when you go out there now, like we're 2 weeks away from our first variety starting to be picked, and you push on that cone, it stays pushed in. Pretty simple. You push on the cone and it fluffs back out. It's starting to get dry. The other easy way to do it is if you rip that cone open right down the middle or cut it right down the middle, you'll start to see the lupin in there. And that lupin, it's pretty consistent on all hops, but you want to see a school bus yellow coming out of that.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll start to see that lupin come out onto the leaves of the cone. And lastly, and this is online a couple different places, if you tip the cone over and you start running your hands over the little spikes that are coming off the cone, and those start to flake off, then you know it's just about ready, or it is ready to harvest. Now, there is much easier ways to do that, but that's the stuff we do out in the field, and then we actually bring it back and we do a dry matter test. So hop cones typically get picked between 20 and 24% dry matter. So if you go online, you say, how do I get my dry matter? It goes in the microwave. There's a very consistent process to see if your hops are ready to be picked. And if you're a home brewer, you probably pick right at that 20% to 22%. You pull it off, you got a fresh cone, you can put it in. So in our commercial side of things, we have to pick at the low end and the high end. So some of these hops only last 3 to 4 days at full maturity.
Right.
And so we have to pick right at the green matter stage, and then we have to pick at the tail end of the stage. We have one variety that lasts 14 days. We have one that lasts 3 days. And then we got two that last around 6 or 7 days. So if we're only processing an acre at a time, our max acreage per variety can be no more than 8 acres, really is our maximum, because we can't get it off the vine quick enough. We can't get it out of the field quick enough. It'll be too green at the beginning and too ripe at the end.
Right. Otherwise, you need a bigger harvester, right?
Correct. A bigger harvester and bigger process.
Yeah. And obviously, as you mentioned, the fresh harvested wet hops don't last very long. What's the process for actually drying and packaging hops after you harvest them?
So I'm going to throw another little clip in here. So we offer fresh harvest or fresh brews. We do it a little bit differently here, and it's worked out for the last 5 years. So we offer anybody who's doing a fresh brew or a whole cone.
You're talking about wet hops, yeah.
Correct. Anybody who's doing a wet hop beer, we offer free wet hops to anybody who shows up. So we have people come as far as Chicago, which is about 4.5 hours. We've had people from Ohio, Southern Indiana. They'll come up just for harvest, and we usually have between 15 and 20 breweries that come up. And we say they're free, but we say it's free with the purchase of hop pellets. So everybody who's brewing a beer on the fresh hop side, I've never met anyone who hasn't had pellets of that exact same hop to spruce up what they're brewing.
Mm-hmm.
So they come and they might get 50 pounds, 100 pounds, 200 pounds of wet hops, and then they'll grab a couple 11-pound bags of pellets of the same variety so they can make their brew. So we offer that 100%. So we have people here all throughout harvest, usually 2 or 3 at the same time, and then we just pick the cycle. So if anybody's out there interested in doing it, and even if you're a home brew in Michigan and you're like, I'm bored, drive up to Ludington area, Manistee, come grab some fresh hops. You don't get to interact with us on a full level because we're working, but you get to watch the entire process happen, the entire harvest, and it repeats a complete cycle every 26 to 28 minutes. We do one complete 220 harvestable batch of hops. So it's not like it's a long process. You can watch the whole thing happen in 28 or 30 minutes, sit there, have a beer, and then take your hops and walk out the door. So it's a lot of fun.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Now, what was the question? Because I kind of went off on that.
I was asking you, can you describe the process you go through to dry and package the hops?
Yes.
You have somebody, you turn it over to somebody, I assume, right?
I do not. I built a bedroom here in the hop building. And for the last, 2017, I stay here for the 6 weeks of harvest. I'm married, have kids. Both my kids are now college bound. And it's a really nice interaction where we work all day. So we start at 7. We get done harvesting around 3:30, 4 o'clock. everybody packs up and leaves. We do our finish cleanup, and then I end up staying here. The dryers start at 9 in the morning, and it runs all the way till my first batch is done between 10 to 14 hours. 12 hours, kind of my.
So you have your own dryer, I guess, on
We
premises.
do. We have a 4-level tiered dryer. So we carry about 500 pounds dried per level. So we do 2,000 pounds a day. So I always say an acre a day. That's not actually true. When the dryer's full, the day is done. And so we only have 2,000 pound drying capability. So that ends up being about an acre, maybe a little bit more, depending on the variety. And then that cycle goes through. So 4 levels, which means each tier dries differently. And then those tiers drop down, cycle through.
Mm-hmm.
So the first tier will be done around 10 o'clock at night. Second tier around 12 to 1 o'clock. The third tier, 2 to 3 in the morning. And the fourth tier right around 5 a.m. And so those get brought out, dumped onto the cooling floor. They sit there and cool down to, we call it ambient temp, because you can't say it cools down to a level, because it might be 80 degrees humid, or it might be 55 degrees and cold. So we just want it the same temperature as the rest of the room. And then it gets put into bales. And our bales are 150 pounds. They're 22 inch by 22 inch by 42 inches tall. 42 or 46, one of those. And we compress them down into a bale. And that bale then goes into a storage room, not a cold storage room, for at least 24 hours to let it go to ambient all the way to the center.
Mm-hmm.
And from there, it will get put onto skids of 8 bales and then into a freezer. So that is our process. And what that allows it to do is we're compressing all the air out of that hop when we put it into a bale. And then it allows the oxygen not to get to the innards of that bale, which causes it to start to break down in the system.
Sure.
And then once we get that temperature kind of cooled down. So the biggest problem people have is they try to bale these things too quickly. They're too hot, and then they get really hot in the center of the bale, and they start to cause mildew and problems. So letting the bale sit before you throw it into a freezer or cold storage, or at least making sure that it's the same temperature throughout the bale, is a critical thing that we had to learn the hard way, unfortunately. Mm-hmm. And once that happens, you can put that bale into the freezer before pelletizing, and it can sit there for as long as you need it to. Sometimes we'll have bales in the freezer for 3 months before they make it to pelletizing, and we don't lose any real analytics to it because it's compacted to the point where no oxygen can get in.
Now, is there any analog somebody could try from home? Is there any way to easily dry hops at home? There
is. We have people drying hops. You can dry them just with air, with a fan, on a screen door. You can put it in a dehydrator like the old school 90s dehydrator, multiple tiers. You can turn that on and turn it on low. The drying process, we like to bring the hops between 8-12% moisture.
Mm-hmm.
So if you go online and you see how to get your moisture test, which is in the microwaves, very easy. That's the easiest, simplest way to do it. I recommend having an outdoor microwave. If you do your inside microwave and you're a married man, you might not make it out of there alive, or married woman at the same point there, because it stinks so doggone bad like hops that your microwave's going to smell like all your food's going to smell for a month.
Excellent.
So I recommend having a cheap one in the garage. But once you have that down to 8 to 12%, that's where we like to see that moisture level. If you do that, you can throw those hops right into a Ziploc bag or right into a vacuum seal bag, vacuum seal that, and throw it into the freezer. And those hops are going to be good for you all year.
Yeah.
So as a home brewer, that's the easiest way to do it. If you don't have nitrogen purge, you're not going to pelletize everything else, a vacuum sealer and a microwave, and then either a dryer. If you're doing it just with air on a screen, it might take as much as 24 to 36 hours to dry that down to 10 to 12%. But if that's your hobby and that's what you like to do, I mean, start picking on a Friday, and by Sunday you're putting them in bags.
I'm thinking a dehydrator is probably the way to go there, right?
It's really simple.
Yeah. Well, if you got any closing thoughts and also advice for people looking to grow some hops at home.
The biggest thing, if you're looking to grow hops at home, is just if you're not going to test the soil, you're not going to do anything, and you want these things to come up every year, just drill a hole and fill it with good dirt. Save yourself the pain. And then the other thing is just, we're here as a source to interact with brewers, but we get calls from home brewers all the time. if there's something you're interested in, our door here is open. We allow people through here. We probably have anywhere from 30 to 40 different people come through a year. We have schools come through here. We love to teach about hops and to interact with people that are in the brewing industry. This is not a hobby for us. This is our living, and the more excitement we can get out there about the process, we like to keep our doors open for the next 30 years, and that only takes you guys to interact with. And then the trials. Hang 'em High Hops offers brew trials for all breweries that haven't brewed with us before. We send these out in multiple emails and everything else. If you're watching this video and working through, I'll put a special thing on the hit list there. If you want to do a brew trial with Mackinac or Bergamot or Emerald Spire or Paradigm, we'll get you quantity and we'll get you brewing, because 1 out of every 3 people that brew with this stuff call us again and again and again. So the more that we can get out there, the better. And we always love brewing with new people.
And your website again, Scott?
It is hanghamhighhop.com. And you will see our new website hopefully in October. Right now our website is still out there for purchase. And we try to get everything on there, but we don't have all the malts and grains. So hanghamhighhop.com. In October, you will have 750 different varieties that can be shipped right to your house. Check for our specials. Sign up with our newsletter and you can get specials. We do specials every single month, whether it's variety specific, percentage off your total order, or free shipping.
Well, thank you, Scott. Really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule. I know you're getting ready for harvest to talk with us today. Thanks again.
All right. Appreciate it. And call me anytime. I love doing these.
And today, my guest, Scott Mast from Hang 'em High Hops, Michigan-based hop farmer. Thanks again, Scott.
Thank you.
Well, a big thank you to Scott Mast for joining me this week. Thanks also to Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine. They've recently launched an all-new experience called Craft Spirits and Distilling. If you make or love spirits, check out spiritsanddistilling.com for recipes, how-to videos, their Spirits and Distilling podcast, and much more. Again, that new site is spiritsanddistilling.com. And BeerSmith Web, the online version of BeerSmith brewing software. BeerSmith for the web lets you design great beer recipes from any browser, including your tablet or phone. Edit recipes on the go with access to the same full suite of recipe building tools as our desktop version. Try BeerSmith Web today by creating a free account at beersmithrecipes.com. And finally, a reminder to click that like and subscribe button on YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, or whatever platform you're listening on. Clicking those buttons is a great way to support the show. I'd like to thank you for listening, and I hope you have a great brewing week.